Getting out of an abusive relationship early makes a huge difference.
And I'm proud to say I did come in as a victim, but I am a survivor.
Then I could see my mom. My mom was walking toward us. And I got excited. And I was like, there's my mom. And then he didn't stop.
I'm trying to keep it together, I said. I gave in to the tears. And I hated that.
It's not necessarily the easiest process. It's not necessarily the prettiest process, but it is the most effective process. Like, you can do this. I'm going to tell you 100% you can do this, and you're so worth it to do this.
I'm sure losing any child is a real arrow through your heart, but you know, she was great. She was a friend and a family member and our daughter.
There is one thing stronger in me than fear, and that's my determination.
And now, here's your host, Jen Lee.
Welcome back. This is Jen Lee, the creator and host of I Need Blue, Survivors Talk Surviving. If this is your first time joining us, I am happy you are here. If you would like to hear other stories or you have a story to submit, visit www.ineedblue.net. Please note, I Need Blue does contain stories which feature graphic content and could be triggering. Please seek help if needed. Remember, you always come first. This episode focuses on the topic of online dating assault and rape. If you are a victim of rape or know someone who is, contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline operated by RAINN, which is the largest anti-sexual violence organization. They can be reached at 1-800-656-HOPE. When you call this hotline, it automatically routes the caller to their nearest sexual assault service provider. In 2020, 270 million adults used dating apps worldwide. This number is set to continue growing as the volume of 18 to 29-year-olds joining dating apps to meet romantic partners is increasing. In the past, I used dating apps. It was convenient and interesting, to say the least. I wanted to believe people's intentions were genuine, and when they said they were looking for love or a relationship, I wanted to believe it was true. Kristen believed the same things. As a college student, it was common for her friends and her to use dating apps. It was an easy way to find local people with mutual interests. Women aged between 20 and 29 are still more likely to be assaulted after meeting offenders on dating apps. According to the NCA, National Crime Agency, they account for 40% of survivors of this type of crime. Kristen became a part of this statistic. She met someone on a common dating app who sexually assaulted her for hours. She is here to share her experience and provide the red flags leading up to the assault. The details at times are hard to hear, but many women experience this and feel too shamed and afraid to come forward. I've had the opportunity to get to know Kristen, and she is not just a brave woman, but she is a friend. Kristen, thank you, and welcome to the I Need Blue podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jen, to share my story today. I'm really excited for your audience to hear.
Well, I really appreciate you being here. And, your story is something that many of us can relate to. So let's talk about your experience. And I know we really want to focus on the precautions when it comes to using dating apps.
This happened back in 2017. Usually most people who are on dating apps have multiple ones because, you really would just want to find the right person or someone that you can connect with and that you can have like a good relationship with. Because, the end goal for me has always been, I want to find someone that I can be happy with being with. Today with my story, it's more of a precautionary tale. I'm not saying that dating apps are bad by any means. I actually met my longtime boyfriend of 4 years now on a dating app, even after this experience. So I'm not saying don't go on dating apps. I did not have a very good experience. The problem with online dating is there's not many red flags when you start dating someone online or like talking about meeting. Obviously sometimes there's red flags. I'm not saying there never is, but like even with people that seem relatively normal on these dating apps, there's not always that flashing red sign like, hey, you should be worried. I'm a threat of some type. You can think someone is nice and perfect and good looking, and they might look exactly how they say they look. They might be exactly who they say they are, but it doesn't mean that they're going to respect you.
Yes, you are right.
I'm always that hopeless romantic type, but what if, and that's where it gets you. And sometimes you should just listen to your gut, honestly. This guy who I thought was nice, after texting for like a day or two. Originally, when we were talking about hanging out, I was in the middle of a homework assignment and I didn't know if I really wanted to go out with him that night, but I was thinking like, well, I want to go out on a date because how am I ever going to meet someone if I don't go out on dates? He seemed normal. It wasn't like he was threatening at all. Like if I thought he was threatening, I wouldn't have gone out with him at all. I invited him to go to dinner with me that night. And then as he was on his way over, he called and he said he got there and I was still doing my homework assignment for the next day at the time because I was in college. Well, I don't want to make him wait outside because it was cold and raining. I didn't want to be rude. In college, it's normal when you're in a dorm room to invite people in your dorm room, any gender, just to hang out. It's not uncommon for a first date either. Like a lot of my friends have done it. In most scenarios, it's fine and things turn out fine. Kind of the caveat to this, and I guess I should like reference this as well, is I did try to take precautions before we met. I did tell him, and I texted him prior to this, when I'm inviting you up to my dorm room, it's not that I want to do anything sexual with you. I don't want anything sexual to happen tonight. I just want to get to know you, and I just want to make my boundary clear. And I did text that beforehand, so it wasn't that I led this person on to believe anything. I was very clear about my intentions.
Were you alone in your dorm room?
Yeah, at this point, I was alone in my dorm room. He came up and, I was like, hey, do you want to sit down? I offered him my chair, like that I had near my desk. This is just like me literally being on my laptop typing and saying, I'm sorry, I'm busy. Like, but I still want to go out with you.
What was your first impression? So when you first saw him, what did you think?
I thought he was handsome, I guess you would say. Like he was physically attractive to me.
So what you saw online kind of matched what was in person. So there was
Yes.
some legitimacy there.
Yeah, and he seemed very friendly. There's nothing wrong. Like he wasn't aggressive or he stood for an hour and a half. At first that gave me kind of like, I guess, a false sense of security when that happened because I thought that was really respectful. He stood a few feet away from me, so he wasn't all up in my, he wasn't in my bubble. And so I didn't feel violated at this point at all. And actually we were having a decent conversation.
And he was being patient.
Yeah. And he wasn't pushing me.
Can I ask, from the first time you all contacted each other on the dating app, how long had it been till now we're at this moment where you are meeting face to face?
48 to 72 hours later, I would say. So like 2 to 3 days. It was very short after when we met online that I met him in person, which is pretty common as well.
Right. And he lived close by.
Yeah, he lived close by, and he was saying that he was going to have to go out of town or be unreachable for a while because of his job. It felt more like, oh, if I want to see him on a first date, I need to do it sooner rather than later. Even then, I wasn't thinking that was inherently pushy. So there's nothing standing out to me as like some huge red flag. There wasn't anything until about an hour and a half or 2 hours in the date itself. I just finished my homework a few minutes before that. And at that point, we were just like talking and we were going to go out soon, which is when he asked if he could kiss me. And, I liked him at that point. And it's hard for me to admit that. That's kind of, I guess, where things started going not great. I didn't mind him kissing me because at that point, and it's hard to admit as a survivor, like when this happens, that you actually had some type of attraction at all to the person. When he kissed me, it was fine because I don't necessarily think that's inherently sexual. I thought that was more romantic at the time. Like, oh, he likes me. Great. That was a good thing to me at the time. And then it started progressing further, and he started getting like a little bit pushier. He started asking if I liked having anal sex. He started asking like really personal questions about like my sexual life and stuff. And then, he was like, hey, how about we do oral sex? And I wasn't into this part at all. Like, and that's where I felt very uncomfortable and trapped to begin with. And that's where it really started kind of going downhill.
Yeah, and there's a lot of women who have experienced exactly what you are experiencing right now to the point where you're comfortable. Can you explain what's going through your head, what you're feeling in your heart? Like your heart, I have to imagine your heart is racing.
Yeah, you definitely kind of get the chills, I guess you would say, or goosebumps about the situation when you start feeling uncomfortable and violated. And the thought process is hard. It depends on your personality type, but a lot of people I know and me are people pleasers. Like you just inherently want to make the other person happy because you're a good person and you care about this other person's feelings. And then you're like, okay, like, do I reject them outright? Like, how do I be polite to them? I know back then I didn't have much self-esteem, so it just made it even harder to be able to stand up for myself in any type of way. Even though I was uncomfortable to some degree, I'd answer his questions. Well, have you ever had anal sex? Would you want anal sex? I said, absolutely not. It's not something I'm interested in. So, like, I did have enough confidence and self-awareness to say what I wanted and didn't want. But when he started being more pushy about it, in terms of just starting to take things rather than ask, that's when I kind of froze or, didn't know what to do because I felt only comfortable enough saying I didn't want things to happen, not necessarily trying to fight back or push away or.
Were you afraid if you would have said, you know what, I'm not comfortable right now, I need you to leave? Were you afraid that he might get mad?
Yeah, that's definitely something that's on your mind. I was being very clear with what I wanted at that point. It wasn't something that could have been misinterpreted because I was saying, well, I didn't really want anything sexual to happen tonight. I said that earlier before he even got there. I said that during, like, I'm not having sex with you tonight. That's just what it is. To that point, that's when you start being afraid. Is he going to hurt me physically if I do not comply? Because he doesn't seem to be understanding what I want. It was a weird, I guess, kind of conundrum where it's like he's asking what I want, but ignoring what I want anyway. It's like the illusion of having a choice when you seemingly don't. And I feel like a lot of women have been in this situation in which you feel so pressured to a certain degree. You're like, okay, fine, whatever, and you just kind of give in a little bit because if this is the way I can get you to go, okay, fine. And it's terrible. That's a terrible situation to be in. But I know a lot of women and a lot of my friends who have been in the same exact position. It's a hard position to be in because pretty much you're just trying to do self-preservation and survival at that point because you don't know how people are going to react when they're rejected. And if they're not respecting what you say when you're already rejecting them, you don't know how much further to push that rejection. Like, this is hard for me to say because, there's going to be some of my friends in my family that listen to this. Some parts of this evening were consensual. I wasn't happy about doing anything, sexual in this scenario. I didn't want to. I did say no originally, but at some point I was just like, maybe if you give in, he'll leave.
That's very honest and very candid of you to admit that. You consented in hopes that he would be happy and he would leave. And you wouldn't have to come out and say no and escalate a situation and definitely end up somewhere you did not want to go.
I never wanted to have penetrational sex of any type that night. And that's hard. It's kind of like you almost feel so afraid they're going to do something even worse to you. Are like, okay, well, that's not as bad as if they wanted this. And then so you're like, okay, that's only one step up and that's not the whole thing of what they want. So then I'll give them that and then hopefully that'll be enough and they'll go away. And it's totally a trauma thinking, This is my first time ever sharing my story like publicly. A lot of people they know I've been assaulted, but they don't know the story behind it. They don't know that this is someone I went on a date with. They don't know what I went through after. That's what's really hard about it.
Can I go back to now the night of the attack when you all are still in the dorm room? He's asking you questions which are making you obviously very uncomfortable. What ultimately happened?
He kind of coerced me into doing oral things, which I wasn't thrilled about, but I didn't necessarily say no either. It was one of those situations in which it was like an unenthusiastic okay, if that makes any sense at all. Like, you just want to get out of the conversation. And you're like, well, if this stops us from like getting more awkward or more dangerous, then fine. Like, if this is all that's going to happen, then fine. And then like, I'm never going to talk to you again. I'll never see you again. That'll be it. But ultimately, that is not what ended up happening. After he was done with the oral part of, I don't even know what to call it, but he then just decided, ignoring everything I said prior that night, and then just went for it, I guess you would say, which is disgusting, but like, that's exactly what happened. And there's not a better way to put it. And at that point, I'm laying there crying and feeling terrified. I can't move and I can't speak because I tried. Like, you know, it's like where you want to scream. No, like, you want to scream and you want to cry and you want to do a lot of things, but like, you're just stuck. And it almost feels like there's your body and then there's your mind, and your mind's screaming stop and your body just won't. There's just nothing happening. You're not making any noises. You're trying to talk, but you can't talk. It just feels like you're trapped within yourself. And it's terrifying. And I feel like a lot of survivors will understand that, because freezing is a natural reaction, because your body has fight or flight, but it also has freeze, where it will just stop if that's what it thinks is best for it.
Wow. And that's where survivors understand that, but those on the outside, have you found that that's hard for them to understand?
Absolutely. I don't find a lot of people on the outside who really understand me, to be quite frank, like, which is why I don't talk about it with very many people that are close to me. They don't know about these things and my reactions and my thoughts to things, because I don't think a lot of people understand. I'm hoping after I talk about it like this, that hopefully I can get through to them and they'll understand, because at the end of the day, it's like, I'm a human that said no, and like, I was violated against my will, and that's like, at the end of the day, that is all that matters.
You are right. That is all that matters.
Yeah. I was very clear.
Yeah, you sent the text before you even met him.
Exactly, yeah, and I saved those texts, and at least there was that. I hate to say it like that, but like, that was kind of key, like, later in the story, is that I saved those text messages.
What happened next?
Then he decided to ask if I wanted to get dinner, which is, you don't think that after someone assaults you that they would want dinner with you. It's just a confusing situation. And then also, I was very confused as well, because even in that moment of when he's assaulting me, you're thinking in your head, and like, it's sad because survivors think this all the time. What did I do to make him think that I said yes to this? Because I didn't. And you know you didn't, but you're trying to like rationalize it in your head to make the situation better, because otherwise you're being violently assaulted by someone you barely know. And that is terrifying. It's really hard to kind of put into words how it feels, because it's literally like the worst feeling imaginable, because you feel helpless and you feel hopeless, and there's not like anyone there to save you. It's just you.
Well, and you feel powerless.
Yes.
Because where you should have had power over your own body, over your own, yes, I want to do this, no, I don't want to do this, somebody came in and literally just took all that power away from you.
Yeah. And that is what's very traumatizing about the situation. You feel like you're a prisoner in your own body afterward because of that.
Yeah. Did you go to dinner?
Yeah, I did, because immediately your brain, like I said, it doesn't think through things. So right when someone's like, you have a way out of this situation, of course you're going to take it. Like, that was like my way out of that dorm room, and I did not want to be in that dorm room anymore. I didn't care if it was hit with him or not. I did not want to be in that situation. I didn't want to be in the bed. I did not want to be anywhere near my dorm room, like, because that's where you're most vulnerable. And I wanted to get out.
That made complete sense when you said that. I absolutely get that. And it gets you out into a place now where there's more people and you're not alone with this monster.
Yeah. And that's what happened. We did go out to dinner. We didn't talk almost at all the entire time. At that point in time, I was thinking in my head, maybe this isn't as bad as I'm making it out to be. And if he talks to me at dinner, like maybe it'll get better. And then I'll like realize I like him and it'll be fine. You don't want to think that you've been raped on like your first date with someone, you know, like that's the last thing you want to go home and think about.
Right. You're in your head, you're trying to make sense of this by saying, okay, maybe I'm overthinking it. You're looking for a cue from him to validate you really wanting to believe that he did not just sexually assault you, that it actually meant something to him. And by him not really saying anything to you, you just sat in that seat sinking because you're not getting what you need.
We didn't talk in the car on the way there, really. He played some music in the car. He was vaping, which, yeah. And then like we get to the place and we didn't talk. He was watching basketball on TV at this place we were at. It was Easter night because it was at least like 10 p.m. at this point.
So you're at the restaurant. He pays the bill. You leave. You go back to your dorm room, correct? The college.
Yeah. At that point, I had enough time to process that, like, oh my gosh, I don't like this person. This is what they did to me. How do I get out of this scenario? And then immediately you're like, okay, well, this is awkward because now I drove somewhere with them, which is not funny, but I'm laughing because, you know, in your head, you don't think things through, you know, like when you're in that moment of panic where you're like, yes, I just want to get out of here. Like, you don't know what to do because at that point you're like, no one's going to believe me. Because I thought that even then, I was like, no one's going to believe me. I went out to dinner with him right after, like, no one's going to believe that this happened to me. And then I was like, all I want to do is go home. And as sad as this is, if that ended there, if he would have just dropped me off at the dorm room, even though that was rape, I wouldn't have reported it. I wouldn't have told anyone because I would have thought that would be my fault. And I would have thought that that was, you know, but it didn't end there. You know, as horrible as it is, the story just keeps going because this is someone who knew what he wanted, but my opinion did not matter at all on this. It was going to happen regardless of what I thought. The whole assault together went on for 5 or 6 hours. I knew on the way home, I did not want him back up there. I felt terrible. Just absolutely terrible. I felt sick because I was finally processing it. I was traumatized. And then, you know, I'm still with the person that just hurt me. We get back to the dorm and then I'm like, okay, well, I feel really sick. You know, I'm not feeling good. I have a big assignment tomorrow. I really need to go to bed. And at this point, it was like 11:30 at night or something. And then he's like, well, okay, but I mean, I could stay over. And I'm like, no, I want to go to bed. I have a big day and I need to go to bed. I don't want you to stay over. And then he's like, well, I still have my stuff up in your dorm room. I didn't know what to say to that at the time. I was just like, okay, fine. You can go get your stuff. Before this, on the way home, I texted my roommate to see if she was there because I was looking for help. And it was like an easy way because he was like, so is your roommate going to be there? And I was like, I don't know. And internally, I was like, I sure hope so. And so I texted her, hey, are you at our dorm? I need your help. I needed her to get him out of there. But at that point, you know, when I said I was feeling sick and everything, I was like, he won't come up. He'll just leave. But then he didn't. And then he came up to get his stuff. And then he started assaulting me again. At first it started with like kissing again, and I was really not into it. And I kept on like trying to like push him off. But then he just didn't take no for an answer and then just did it again. And then after that, he made me get in the shower, probably to, you know, clean off evidence or whatnot. I don't know. You know, it wasn't explicit. Like he was just like, we're getting in the shower. And I was like, I don't really want to. I don't care what you want. And then after that, and this is what is the hardest part of my story to tell, is after that, I felt so just beaten up and degraded. Honestly, just ruined. I felt ruined. I didn't feel like I was even a person anymore, and like nothing I had mattered. That's what it felt like. I felt so objectified and sad and just depressed. I just felt like no, I didn't even matter at all. And so I go back and I'm like laying in a fetal position and I'm literally sobbing. I'm crying into the pillow, almost like scream crying into the pillow at that point. And he's still in my dorm room. Like this is right after that shower because I felt so degraded and sad that like after the shower I couldn't anymore. Because at that point he tried choking me, he'd slap me. I'm like crying into my pillow in the fetal position. And then I just feel him get on top of me. And at first I was like, is he trying to comfort me? Because I was like, oh, is he hugging me because I'm crying? And it's sad because even in that moment, you still want to think someone's a good person or at least has some heart. But what ended up happening is that is when he started to anally rape me. And that was the worst. Honestly, I mean, the whole night was terrible, but that was the worst because every time, like, whenever I felt it at that point, I felt like I was dying every single time. Like, it felt like a piece of me just died every time. It really felt like that. And I didn't know how I was going to survive after that because the whole time I was laying there, I was thinking, like, I don't even want to live anymore. As he was doing it, I didn't want to live anymore. I thought that this was like the end. I didn't think he would kill me at that point, but I thought I'd kill myself at the end of this because I could not fathom having to live with the memory of what he was just doing to me after I so explicitly said that that wasn't what I wanted. I was emotionally raw, emotionally numb, and I'm in like my most vulnerable position. I was literally just crying on the bed because I could not believe what was happening to me, and all I wanted was I didn't expect him. I just thought he'd leave because at that point it already happened twice. How much more can someone have in them? You know what I mean? And I didn't realize it until it was, literally it just started like hurting. Like I didn't realize what was happening until then. And then at that point I was like, he wasn't trying to comfort me. He was just doing it again. But this time even worse. Because that was the most utter sign of disrespect because like he asked me that multiple times. Like even more so than about sex in general, was he asked about anal sex a lot and I said no. And that is not something I ever wanted to have happen to me. Like that was never something.
Did he say anything to you while he was doing that?
No. I was screaming no at that point though. It felt like an eternity to me. Later in his written statement, he said it was 90 seconds. And man, that minute and a half felt like an eternity. It's just hard, it's really hard. And like the fact that he could recognize things like that, but not recognize my feelings. He knew approximately how long that was and how long it went on for, but like he could not remember me saying no. It wasn't in the moment like that mattered to him. He just ignored me and kept going because that's what he wanted to do. He didn't have any regard for my feelings whatsoever.
So after the third assault, did he finally leave?
Yeah, he finally was like, well, I have work tomorrow, just so nonchalantly. And then I think he used one condom this entire time he was raping me. So most of it was not with any protection whatsoever. At the end, as he's leaving, he literally takes another condom out of this box he brought with him and throws it at my face and then tells me that like I could use it on the next guy that comes through and then leaves. There's not any words for that at all.
No, there's not. I'm sorry that you went through that.
Yeah. And then so, the next day I didn't know what I wanted to do because like I told you prior, I didn't think that anyone would believe me. But at this point, I was so traumatized and scared. Like I couldn't just let it go and not tell anyone. So I told my friends right away the next morning. I told my mom the next day. We went to the hospital. I got the rape kit, which that's a whole traumatizing thing within itself. Like that's another assault almost because like they swab every part of you, take pictures of everywhere of you. They use this flashlight or whatever to light up where evidence is, and you just feel like your whole body's a crime scene. And they take your clothes, they take your bedding, there's a lot that goes into it.
I've heard that, but it's it's worth it.
I agree. I think that coming forward was worth it in the end, even though it didn't have the results that I wanted it to. I still think coming forward is going to be worth it because someone listening, I hope, is going to like resonate with this and feel understood and not like they're alone and suffering.
Absolutely. I want to just take a couple minutes just to talk about what happened to him and what did not happen to him, because really I want to spend a little bit more time really talking about the PTSD that you have, but how you are coping with that. Because there are a lot of sexual assault survivors that still may be stuck in how to go from being that victim to the survivor and take that step. And I really want you to have the time to focus on that versus a lot of time talking about the monster, I'll call him.
I appreciate that because I'm excited to talk about how you can get past something so horrible and hard. So the police interviewed him kind of shortly after because I did end up going to the police. My mom drove me to the police. At first, I did not want to go to the police, but my mom was like, no, you're going to the police. And I'm happy she did that because I wasn't thinking, I was still processing my trauma. And so I wasn't thinking about what I wanted in the future. I didn't even think I wanted a future.
You know, what's interesting about yours too is that you had college campus police. That's important.
Yeah. And they were very helpful and they believed me. You know, I had 2 detectives that believed me the entire time. And so I don't have that experience of them not believing me. And I just want to give a shout out to them actually, because they really were able to make me think that there's good people out there, and especially good people in law enforcement that like try to do their best for you. They talked to him pretty shortly after I reported, and they got a confession out of him. He said he got so in the zone that he just didn't care what I wanted, is pretty much what ended up happening. Is like, he pretty much quoted, I was in the zone and I just didn't even listen to her at all, is pretty much what he said.
So you have this confession. That's strong. That's really good for you. Did he end up in jail?
No. And this is what's kind of surprising because in his written statement, he wrote me a letter of apology almost, where he said, I heard her say stop, but I didn't listen. I kept going. I took something away from her that I can never give back. And I'm sorry. I won't ever do this again. And that's what he wrote in his letter.
How did that make you feel?
Torn. It was a mixed bag, I guess you would say, because like you have some feelings. You're happy they somewhat recognize they did something wrong, you know, like you are happy there's a certain amount of accountability, I guess, that's being considered, but also it just, and this is what's hard because even to sexual assault survivors who never get an apology, I'll tell you from firsthand experience, having one doesn't make it better. It hurts the same. Like I still feel very hurt. That statement went to grand jury. All the evidence went to grand jury. And to those who don't know, grand jury is pretty much like pre-trial where they're trying to see if they have enough evidence to move forward to an actual trial. And they said that they didn't. And so he still walks today as a free man. There's no criminal record. There's not even an arrest record. He was never arrested. His DNA is not in the system. So if he does this again, I mean, unless his name is attached to it and I somehow find it and come forward, like there's no evidence that he raped anyone ever before.
Are you afraid that you will see him again or he will find you?
No, I'm more worried about him hurting someone else, not me. I like saying this statement because I believe it's entirely true. Like rape is a life sentence for that survivor. You don't forget what happened to you. Like you can get a lot of therapy, and I've had a lot of therapy and it's helped, and you can live like a productive, happy life, but you can't forget. You can get past it. Absolutely. And you can still be happy, but you can't forget.
Right. And I think that it's okay that you can't forget. That's my thoughts.
Absolutely. You have to kind of come to terms with the memory itself to be able to like move forward, which sucks. It is a painful thing to do. There's not a way to get around the pain of doing it. It's very painful.
Well, I truly appreciate your courage and I know you're really excited now to have the opportunity to talk about where you are. I got to meet you for the first time like a week ago. So I know a little bit about where you are and I absolutely love it. But tell our audience all about you, where you are today, dating. You said you have a boyfriend, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so my boyfriend is probably the most amazing human on this planet because he met me while I was still dealing with a lot of my PTSD issues, and he has never looked at me any different. Like, he's always loved me for exactly who I was because I used to be afraid I'd never get any better. And he's like, even if you were like this the rest of your life, I'd still love you. And it's just, and that as a survivor makes you feel very, loved and cared for. And because you don't feel like damaged goods anymore. Like, I hate to say it like that, but sometimes some people can make you feel like you're just not worth the effort, or, oh, you've been assaulted, that's too much baggage for me. I've had people tell me that in person once they find out and stuff when I was originally starting to date after the assault.
How long did it take you to start dating again? And did you choose to go back to a dating app?
I did go back to dating apps because I don't think I'd ever I never associated that being the problem, if that makes sense. Like, I didn't think it was the dating app's fault necessarily, but I took different precautions going forward. And this is what I would advise to listeners as well. And I cannot stress this enough. Like, always meet in a public place on your first date because that is what is going to be most protective to you. I mean, it's not that it can't happen, but it's less likely to happen. It took me about 5 months before I was really able to date anyone, I would say. It's hard. You have to get over a lot of intimacy barriers as well. You don't want to be touched. If this lasted 2 or 3 months after the rape, my brother and my dad would hug me and I'd cry after they left. And I felt terrible because, those are people that love me, but because it's a man, it was that type of situation. It took a while to get over the triggers of physical, touching, even if it's just hugs. It took a really long time. I even struggled when I met my boyfriend. I was still struggling when we were dating, so it's not like it really got better, I guess, until end of 2020, early 2021 is when I really.
What happened? What was the moment?
It actually, I don't know, I think it's a collection of tiny moments, if that makes sense. As these tiny victories that just kept happening. I didn't think about it today. I didn't immediately wake up and be like, I'm a sexual assault survivor, or just have an intrusive thought, or have a panic attack or something. And then so as the days kept going and I didn't have that, and as it'd be a few weeks and I wouldn't have one, it would be a few months and I didn't have one, and that's when I started noticing I was really getting better. Therapy really helped. I did what's called cognitive processing therapy, where you take your thoughts about the incident and, for example, man, I should have not gone to dinner. Take that, for example, and then break it down and take the logic into it. Okay, well, you were already traumatized. You weren't thinking right. There wasn't enough blood flow to your brain to make a better decision at the moment, and you were just trying to survive. And then once you start thinking that way and taking your trauma apart in pieces like that, it really helps you kind of come to a place of acceptance, and you're able to let go of a lot of the guilt and shame that you feel surrounding the incident. It's been a great transformation because I'm really happy. I'm very happy with the person I'm with. We actually met on a dating app, but this time we met at Kroger. So
You met at the grocery store. That's good.
yes, we did.
The one thing I want to say too is my older sister, she dates, and obviously she doesn't want to tell me all of her business, and that is quite all right. But I told her, when you go out, since you're not telling me, leave a note in your apartment with the name, the phone number of the person you're going out with, and where you're going and what time you left or whatever. So that way, if God forbid something happens, somebody has a clue as to what is going on. And you still maintain your privacy, because I have no reason to go over there unless there's some sort of emergency. So I think nowadays that's something that's really important for people to take note of as well. Simple. Leave a little note. Who are you with? Phone number, where are you going, what time?
Yeah. I would share my location with my boyfriend wherever I was. If I was getting a ride from someone, like an Uber, I'd be sharing my location constantly. I'd tell someone, hey, I'm going out with this person at this time. This is who you find if something happens to me.
Can you talk about why it's important to listen to your instincts?
Even before I went on the date, I had this kind of like thing where it's like, I don't really feel like I want to. Like something doesn't feel right. But like I said, it's nothing that like you can find a reason for necessarily. Sometimes your body just sees or hears something. It's like a subconscious thing that happens.
Intuition.
Yeah. And so, yeah, and like there's not always a red flag attached to it, but sometimes you just have to, if I'm not feeling like that's a good idea going out somewhere, I'm not going. If I have a gut feeling about something, this doesn't feel right to me, or this person is giving off vibes to me, I won't associate with them, or I'll get out of the situation, or I won't go to an event. I think it's really important to kind of trust your inner instincts, because I think your body picks up on a lot more, and your mind does too, than like you even realize.
I think that is so true. What if the feedback that you got was, oh my gosh, I completely understand what she's saying. I get it. I've been there. I feel it. How would that make you feel?
It would make me feel heard and understood, because like as I tell you the story now, I feel a lot of shame and guilt even now, and I shouldn't feel this way because it's not my fault. I shouldn't feel shame and guilt, but I do, because this is something that people don't talk about because it's inherently shameful. Your perceived mistakes in this are shameful. It's not necessarily I think I made a mistake, but other people definitely think I have. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why'd you let him do this? Why'd you let him do that? There's a lot of questions that survivors get asked that make you not want to talk about it. I have a lot of shame in sharing, actually, but like I'm putting myself out there because I really want to make a difference in the lives. And if someone listening to this feels understood by anything I'm saying, then I feel like I've already done more than I even thought I could on this podcast. My whole experience, I didn't feel it like anyone understood me. And it felt so lonely, and it felt so isolating, and it just makes you feel really terrible about yourself. And that guilt that I was telling you about, Jen, that can kind of just eat you alive if you let it, you know? You can blame yourself forever for a trauma that happens to you, even if it's not your fault. You didn't ask for this to happen.
I want to tell you that you are heard, and I send you another big hug.
Oh,
And you're a remarkable woman to me. You really are.
oh, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. I have the pleasure of seeing you while you are telling your story. And so I see what's in your eyes, and I see the courage. But I also see the smile, which is your way of saying, I got this. I'm stronger than this. I'm going to be vulnerable, but I'm still going to come out okay. And I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jen.
Kristen, can you share in your experience how other sexual assault survivors can find happiness?
Yeah. So if you have the access to therapy, I'd highly recommend therapy. If you don't, definitely find a good friend, is what I would say. And just be open, I guess, to feeling pain. As sad as that is to say, you have to kind of go through the pain to get over the pain and to work through it. You have to think about the memory in order to kind of take control of the memory, so the memory doesn't control you anymore. And that's kind of the goal, I think, for sexual assault survivors, is like once you kind of can control the memory a little bit more and not have the memory control you, that's where you find healing and happiness in, and it frees you up to be able to find happiness.
In other words, you're taking the power back.
Absolutely, you're taking the power back.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have one last question for you. And it's a question that I ask a lot of times when I have domestic violence survivors, because people on the outside, friends and family, they don't know how to help. Like they want to help the other person, but they don't know how to go about that. So for somebody who has a friend, like let's say came up to them and said, you know what, I was raped last night. What should the friend do with that information? How can they help?
So what the best thing that someone can do to help in that scenario is, honestly, you need to listen. Don't try to pry too much. A survivor will open up to you about the details that they're comfortable with sharing with you. and they may not want to go into further details. And then also, the biggest thing is, as hard as it is to understand sometimes about why people make the decisions that they do, you have to try to not judge. And you have to try not to ask, but you consented to part of this, or, oh, you weren't wearing this, or, oh, you went out in this, or, oh, you were drinking, or, oh, that's someone you've met for a long time. Oh, you've been dating or married to them for years. You have to put all of that aside and just focus on the person's well-being more so than the questions that you have, because at the end of the day, no matter what other scenarios are around, what happened to this person, they have still been violated, and they're opening up to you in like one of the hardest moments of their entire life. And they're opening up to you because they want help. They believe that you are a person that can help them. If they open up to you, they think you can help them. And so the best thing you can try to do is listen and just support them. They will have enough other people asking them those questions that you're thinking. They have the police for that, because the police have to ask those questions kind of to a degree. And they'll also have prosecutors, defense attorneys, if it ever gets to that point. They'll have them ripping them apart. They'll have other people they try to open up to that will not understand and will tear them down by asking that question.
And if you tell a friend and they don't make you feel supported, maybe they make you feel guilty, bad, is it okay to distance yourself from them?
Absolutely. You need to do what's best for you in that time. And your friend might not understand. For your own mental health, it's important. But I understand it's hard. I've had situations in which, I've told someone and weren't as supportive as I would have hoped they would have been.
Aside from therapy, have you gone to any groups, like maybe a Facebook group, a local group of women who had been sexually assaulted?
Yeah, I've gone to a few local groups and I've tried. It's just, I haven't gone recently. So I almost wonder, it might turn out differently if I went now, but you have to kind of be in a different headspace to go to one. I would not suggest that for someone who's just like really recently traumatized, because as much as you want to feel like you have someone that understands you, listening to someone else's trauma can be very traumatic.
That's a great point.
And also then you find yourself comparing, like, oh, well, mine might not have been so bad in comparison, but everyone has their own trauma. Just because someone was more physically hurt than you in an assault, it doesn't mean that you hurt any less internally. There's different challenges that come with everyone's individual traumas, of course. Like, everyone does have that unique perspective, I guess you would say, of, people have to go through different things because of their trauma. But at the end of the day, you've still gone through trauma.
Oh, that is such a great point. It is your trauma, and you have to go where you feel most comfortable working through it.
It's a very personal decision about what you want to do and like what justice looks like to you. And that's entirely your decision. I mean, I'm happy my mom did, but she didn't force me to make the decision, because I eventually got to be like, I do want to make a report. Like, I do want to fill out this formal statement. Like, so even though she drove me to the police, it's not like she forced me. And they said, if you're ever uncomfortable, the police were like, if you're ever uncomfortable, it's okay. You don't have to go forward with this if you decide you don't want to, but like, how about we take your statement now and then you can decide later. You need to give the survivors the control in the situation and what happens in their trauma, because if you force them to fill out a police report, or you yourself fill out a police report and things start moving in a way in which they did not consent to, they're just going to feel traumatized again.
So your mom driving you to the police department was a show of support and not force.
Yes, she did explain, you don't have to do anything now. Like, I'm going to drive you there, but it's only so that you'll have options in the future. It's not because you have to do anything. And it was because she said it that way that's what made it okay for me. This is the hardest thing I've had to do, even saying that, like, sharing my story is not easy. It's not something you're ever proud to share, but it's something that's so important that you share, because there's someone else out there that I know is hurting. I want people to hear it from all perspectives. I want my story to like help people better understand what sexual assault survivors go through and some of the thought processes you go through. So I want survivors to know they're not alone. And I want people who haven't been assaulted to step up and be more of an advocate for survivors, because it's really hard for people like me to come forward and talk about it because it's such a polarizing thing. Yeah, I've had many people ask me when he first started to assault you, why didn't you scream? Why didn't you run? Why didn't you fight back? And your body just does not process things as quickly as you think it would. People like to believe that you'll do a certain thing in a certain situation, but that's just not how your body works, because you literally are not processing what is happening to you. You are going with the first thing you think of.
Everything happens fast and time stops, and it just becomes like a series of events.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing it with me and our audience on this platform. You are always welcome.
Like Jen said, you're always stronger than you think you are. And even though you can't see the light at the tunnel, it's going to eventually come. Like, no matter how trapped or stuck or how far down in a dark place you are, you can always come back. I truly believe that. And I just hope that if you're a survivor, you'll reach out to Rain if you need to, and reach out to friends and family and those who, love you. And I just hope that even though I'll maybe never meet any of you or ever get to talk to any of you who might be going through this, that I grieve and I feel with you for your trauma. And I just hope you aren't alone, but there is a way to get through it. I promise that things will get better.
I could not have ended this segment any better. Thank you so much, Kristen. I really do appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
This is Jen Lee, creator and host of I Need Blue podcast. To hear additional stories, visit www.ineedblue.net. And remember, you are stronger than you think.